Okay, so we're starting with our forget-me-nots now, and I must say I'm not sure I would have dared to make it in sugar because it's one of those very, very delicate little flowers, and I've not had much luck with keeping those safe, even with Nicholas Lodge's gum paste, which I find very strong and very nice and very, very successful for all kinds of flowers. So anyway, clay it is. And when you choose your cutter, make sure that your petals are very well separated, so all the way to the end, as opposed to just outline. Obviously, one way to stop your individual petals from breaking off and crumbling off in case you do an arrangement or what have you, because it is by definition a filler flower, isn't it? So one way for that would be to wire your individual petals, but of course that would be one hell of a job, really, wouldn't it? This very simple shaping, just using your finger, thinning and shaping of the petals, is probably enough for most forget-me-nots. If you look online, they are kind of quite simple, straight petals, but some of them are shaped slightly different, so you just have to have a look. I'm going to try and pin it on my Pinterest board, the ones I copied, and these are the different tools with which you could vein it. The petals, those petals, if you choose to vein them at all. This is what I use. It's just a little blob of silicone putty, which is shaped over the existing veiner, and then made with a little holder that I find comfortable to use. So if you make your own silicone veiners, this might be something that you would want to make for yourself, but you could use some other tools as well, or simply skip this step altogether. That might look quite nice as well. So here I'm going to curl my petals, cup them in just a little bit, and I'm not sure that the actual flower goes like this. I just quite like this effect. And obviously if you cut your paste or your gum paste too thin, then this cupping would be hard to achieve, or if you over dry your clay, so be mindful of that. And as soon as you finish your flower, simply because it's so delicate and small, make sure that you keep it in a plastic bag until you're ready to move on to the next step. So here, as you can see, my cold porcelain is quite sticky, which is why I was fiddling with my cutter from side to side for absolute ages until I managed to take it off. It would have been easy if I just remembered to put some dusting over my board. Okay, so this is to give you an idea of my tools, sizing, and also whenever you roll a little ball for your filler flowers, make sure you use very fresh clay or gum paste, simply because it dries and cracks very quickly. I'm just playing around here, really trying to get the middle that I like with a nice little hollow center in it, and I don't want it to rise too far above the petal level, which is why I've decided to trim a little bit off. So whenever you try to copy a flower that you see elsewhere, just take a moment to have a very close look at it, and then don't be afraid to just use your common sense and customize your crafting to kind of fit what you see on the screen or maybe live. You know, don't be over reliant on tutorials, or at least that's what I find to be quite an effective way to make flowers that look your own, even in small ways. Sorry, my camera is a little bit temperamental, going out of focus here and there. Yeah, so here you go, back in focus. Hello camera, how are you? This little minuscule ball tool is very good, simply priceless in working with small detail. So if you want to buy one of them, have a look in, by comparison, this is the smallest one, the usual SUGARFLAIR set. So if you want to buy one of these, have a look in clay supplies online, sculpture, working with clay and sculpturing and so on. So yeah, this is my middle. It's coming together. I like the way it is, and now I'm going to show you what I do for kind of dusting the middle. And this trick I've picked up from Robert Hines' tutorial, basically to blend the Semolina down to make it a little bit smaller, even if it's small to start with. And for these centers, some of the centers are in white, and then I thought of tinting the clay a little bit to make them stand out a little bit more. So yeah, here we go, adding a bit of glue, and then I'm going to dip it in my Semolina. Okay, so if it's neatly enough done, I think that that little bit of wire that's just peeking through and looking dark and mysterious is pretty much enough. Or you could glue on something else, just a little seed or whatever that might be, with the super glue inside the middle. It might give you an interesting organic effect. It really is up to you what you do with that middle. You just go along with your own tastes. So now I am going to show you a basic toning. This bit only applies to cold porcelain. Obviously I am using oil paints here. They're very nice these days, not smelly and lovely. So if you go with sugar paste, then obviously you need to use dust or what have you. I very much doubt that edible gels would work in the same way on gum paste, because gum paste is quite porous. That said, I haven't actually tried it, so by all means let me know if you try it and it works, or even if it doesn't, leave a comment, see what you think. But if you do try this with sugar, I very strongly suggest you try it on not a very dry petal, but when it's still leathery kind of level of dryness, because as I mentioned, this particular flower and all little filler flowers are extremely fragile. Even if they are wired individually, those little petals, they are extremely fragile, and it's a huge shame to break your flower when it's already put together nicely and ready to go, really. this is probably the main way to tone petals. Make sure you don't overdo on paint straight away. So just like with sugar dusts, apply it bit by bit, make it darker in layers, so to speak, and also make sure that you take your time and blend the color down really, really finely. And again, with paints, with these oil paints, it's much easier a job in a way than with color dusts, because the graduation of color comes so much easier than it does with gum paste and dust. That, you know, it's something that is quite scary to endeavor to start with, but it's certainly worth a try if you work with cold porcelain. Now, another thing to consider is oil paint's drying time. Now, because this is a very dry paint toning, chances are it's not going to smudge over other flowers in your arrangement and interfere too much, but this is something to be considered. If you do something like a huge amount of foliage, for example, but yeah, research it, try it out, play with it, and there are also drying agents that speed up drying of oil paints on clay, but I would cover it in some other video. So now we're done with our toning, and I am going to add a little bit of stemming clay onto these little stems, and as usual it needs to be a little bit more liquid, a little bit sticky, a little bit softer than the usual clay we work with. So by all means use whatever tools you find comfortable to get this. I find that watering it down once it's on a stem helps a lot, and then use your fingers. They are a fantastic tool. I mean, the downside of that would be having really messy fingers and hands. I have on all of my videos, so I do apologize for the aesthetics of my main tools that I use. And then once your little individual flowers are stemmed, then assemble it. Sorry, it's a little bit out of shot. So one by one, arrange it around the main stem to your liking, really. You might want to have a look how they put together, and you can glue them together to the main stem with super glue to have a really nice and neat stem. But I find that super glue is not very reliable in gluing them to the stem. If you know otherwise, or know of a super glue that is more super than a super, by all means drop me a line, it would help everyone. But other than that, just use minimum amount of the tape and just smoothen it down. I'm going to show you a very lazy and easy way to cover a delicate, very tightly spaced stem like this. The better way of doing it would be to just really work on it individually, stemming it down, and this is a quick way, a beginner's way or a quick way of doing it, and it also looks better than just the tape, in my opinion. But obviously, you know, jury is open. I'm sure some people would look at this method and shout and scream that it's untidy and horrible, but I think sometimes it's nice to save time, and sometimes it's also nice to take things in little steps. As you will be able to see from the picture of the dry flower, it does look better when the whole thing is dried. And here we go, voila, your little forget-me-not. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe, and I will see you next week with another tutorial.